Welcome everyone, Costin here on Serious Gaming with the video about the PC performance, video settings, keybind options, and PC controls of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. I'm running this at max settings, everything maxed out, everything enabled, on an i7-3770K, a GTX 980, 8 gigs of DDR3, though I might switch those soon enough. But anyway, that's a pretty good computer. And this game is running at between 40 to 50 FPS with everything turned off. Now obviously for the purposes of my let's play of the game on Death March difficulty, this is on Death March itself, and the difficulty of the game right now is on Death March, and I'm gonna get my ass kicked as a result of that. Yep. I will tone down some settings, but I want to talk about controls first before I get into performance and graphical settings. So keybinds, everything seems fine at first glance until you realize that you have to bind stuff with different keys for things that just would have worked on a single key. So for instance, you cannot jump in combat. It just won't work. You can only jump outside of combat, and while you can ride a horse in combat, you can't sprint or roll or dodge while on a horse. So why not give us the option of being able to bind these keys together? Why not? Is this incompetence on their part? No, I don't think it's actually incompetence. I think it's because of criticism that other games like Dragon Age or Mass Effect have got, and other games, many other games have done this. On consoles, weirdly enough, they do actually bind stuff together because they have less buttons. On PCs, like, yeah, you want different buttons for different functions? Here you go. At least give us the option of binding stuff together. Or for instance, with dodging and rolling, the way it works on consoles is that you can you press one button to dodge, you press the same button twice to roll, and that's just more elegant than having to press two different buttons. Take it from someone who played something like World of Warcraft, where I had to deal with over 30, 40 keybinds, besides movement keys, mind you, on a constant basis. It just works considerably better to use modifiers of a single key versus using separate keys. It's just easier. It's muscle memory. It's easier for your body to learn, for your muscles to learn how to do it. Because if you want to play well, then you're gonna have to commit to this kind of stuff, to muscle memory. It's just easier, more elegant, that kind of stuff. Another problem with the controls of the PC version. Another problem with the signs. You can assign keys to the various signs, but they're to unlock cast the signs. Instead, you have to press a separate key for a sign to actually cast. Unlike The Witcher 2, where you press the button, you cast that particular sign the moment you pressed it. And obviously, you can use the mouse wheel to switch between signs, which kind of makes it pointless to assign different keybinds to different signs if you can't switch between if you can't cast them quickly. Hell, it's even better to probably use this menu versus yeah, versus, hold on, I'm just gonna use the prompter, versus pressing different keybinds. There's just so many things. There's potions, consumables, quick access menu, that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Another problem with the controls. You can't switch between locked on targets easily. So if you're facing a group of enemies, by the way, these wolves are level 5. I just started the game, I have 0 experience, and I'm gonna get my ass kicked by these guys. Because that's just how The Witcher is on Death March. It doesn't hold back. Right. These guys. Alright. The problem is the way Geralt switches between enemies. Now it might seem, oh, it's running just fine here, right? But there's this weird delay between switching between enemies. It doesn't switch as fast as I would want it to, personally. And sometimes you'll have Geralt charging off in the direction you don't want them to. Right, that's one wolf, not the whole group. It seems that if I want to face a group of enemies, you'll have to wither them down one by one. I'm using rolling more than dodging because dodging just doesn't seem to work especially well with monsters or beasts. Human enemies, I could imagine it, this working better. Oh, by the way, AI problems. Enemies getting stuck on terrain constantly. But that's just a general game issue. Versus... a PC specific issue. And if I lock on a target, well, though Geralt will do very well with that target, and he will switch to another locked on target until you remove the lock on.
Come on, come closer.
Well, I'm dead. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to demonstrate the combat and some of the issues there that I personally have. I would like an option to be able to switch between locked on enemies using the mouse wheel, like in Dark Souls. The fact Dark Souls has that, The Witcher doesn't, is a problem. I would also like that bloody message about control scheme removed, because it's just goddamn annoying. I don't need to know that I have keyboard and mouse when I don't have... Oh, actually in my case I actually do have a controller plugged in. I guess I should remove that and see what happens after that. But I'm constantly getting this message. I don't have an Xbox controller, by the way, but I do have a PS3 controller. Got that for some emulated PS2 games. Anyway, in terms of video settings and PC performance, let's talk about that. So we've got post-processing, motion blur, blur, anti-aliasing, bloom, sharpening, depth of field, chromatic aberration, vignetting, light shafts. Of all of these things, I'll disable the vast majority of them, besides anti-aliasing, ambient occlusion, vignetting, and light shafts, of course. But everything else, maybe sharpening I'll keep on. But these things don't really impact performance all that much. It's just preference, really. And I just don't like any of them. Anti-aliasing. In terms of anti-aliasing, I think it's a temporal form of anti-aliasing, but this game doesn't really need anti-aliasing all that much. You can see some jagged edges there on the water, I guess, and on objects up close, but it's not the game which requires anti-aliasing. It certainly wouldn't require something like MSA wouldn't really have that much of an impact. The performance impact from the anti-aliasing in this game is small. And considering the high system requirements of this game already, shoving in something like TXA or an MSA or anything like that just wouldn't make that much sense from my perspective. In terms of graphics, VSync, maximum frames per second. I like the fact that you have maximum frames per second versus VSync, because this will help reduce screen tearing. You don't want your frame rate to go over 60 when you don't have 120 hertz monitor, or anything like that, 144 hertz monitor, etc., etc. So this does help. Obviously, it also helps keep your CPU graphics card cooler, because it's not rendering frames that you're not seeing, right? Anyway, and this, by the way, applies especially well for one thing. The map. The map can go to hundreds of FPS easily, no problem. So having a FPS limitation there helps things out there. Anyway, NVIDIA Hairworks, and by the way, you can keep this to 30 if you want, 60, unlimited, your choice. NVIDIA Hairworks, the biggest performance hit of anything. You can set this on Geralt, but even on Geralt alone, it's a huge performance hit. Like, we're going from 50 to 60, no problems. And it's especially noticeable during cinematics. Now, I've got a horse here. Let's say I enable it purely on Geralt, right? It's a 10 FPS difference. Quite big, and I'm seeing some stuttering, I guess you could say. I don't know. Alright. That's just Geralt. The horse doesn't have it. I enable it on the horse. By the way, I'm very close to the horse, but this is not the cinematics. This is just open world. Performance, it's considerably worse than cinematics. Any cinematics. Hairworks enabled or off. And with the horse, it's 5 difference, 5 FPS, 3, 4, 5 with the horse. And that's with the horse. It's actually 2 or 3 at this stage, right? Depends on the angle. Now, if I mount this beast... and I start riding, yeah, the difference is minimal between having it on Geralt and having it on other objects. Depends obviously on how many people you're talking about. It's on wolves, it's on various things in the world. Besides that, you've got number of background characters. This will affect performance in cities. I can go to a village, but there's not that many people there. So let's just ride to White Orchard. It's not very far away. Don't judge it based on the map. This area is actually pretty goddamn small. It'll only take me 2 minutes to actually get there. So, performance, I guess, is okay, though it's a bit ridiculous, really, that the game requires such a high-end system to run. Well, when Nvidia said, oh, if you want to run the game at 1080p, you need it 980. I assumed they were talking, and with Hairworks enabled, I assumed they were talking about 60 FPS, but apparently they weren't. And it can drop to 30 FPS during cinematics. Okay. It's annoying to having to hold down the T button, I can tell you that for a fact. But that's just my own choice in terms of keybinds. Alright, so there's NPCs here. A couple, not that many. But I don't see a performance hit, a big performance hit. About Hairworks on other characters, it is there, but I don't really notice it all that much. By the way, Fraps is just going to change position. Let me just put it back up. Because my dismount key is the same key that changes the overlay for Fraps there. Frame rate in this place seems okay, but as I said, there's not that many people. There's obviously going to be more people in Novigrad, in Oxenfurt, that kind of stuff. Anyway, other stuff. In terms of increasing performance, let's say you want to keep Hairworks, right? And you want to run the game well. Well, what I'd lower is grass density. No, maybe not grass density, but foliage visibility rate. That certainly can play a role in terms of performance. And back. Alright, 60 FPS. Not constant. Need to stress this, it's not constant. It's gonna drop during cinematics, it's gonna drop during dialogue. But mostly set 60 FPS. It's also, I haven't actually noticed FPS drops during battles, but I noticed these drops here and there, but you know, that's expected. You can't really expect the game to run at constant frame rate. It will drop here and there, and I'm really pushing my system here. It's actually overheating. So I might, well, texture quality doesn't actually have that much of an impact. What about the level of detail? Alright, still dropping. Seems shadows affect a lot, but nothing beyond that really is affected all that much, which is really weird. Obviously, you disable that. Let me disable motion blur, not anti-aliasing, bloom, sharpening, chromatic aberration. I don't expect a performance increase from this. It's gonna be small, insignificant, but there you go. 60 FPS. Just had to lower one setting from ultra to high, and that's shadows. Constant 60 FPS in the game, but not for cinematics. And there's these weird goddamn drops here and there. I think they could optimize the game further in terms of performance. And ultimately about the visual downgrade controversy, as I've stated in my most recent video on the subject. If the reason they had to tone down the graphics is to achieve this performance, and this performance, by the way, in my opinion, is actually terrible, then that's fine. They should have stated that outright, and that's where I stand. They should have been honest to their consumer base. Anyway, that's The Witcher 3. How it looks, how it runs. And here, in close quarters, right, with Hairworks enabled, oh man, that performance hit, because I'm closer. Because the camera is closer to Geralt, and if I disable it, his hair looks considerably worse, by the way. But I get that's constant 60 FPS. Okay. Well, that's it. I'll need to decide whether or not to keep Hairworks enabled. Considering the performance hit. I'm gonna try and fix this, try and increase my performance. Maybe there's some fix out there, we'll see. Anyway, Costin, signing out.